Please be seated. One of the privileges of being part of this parish has been hearing two important themes repeated over and over and over. Curlin always included that the way of love is the way of Jesus, and it is the essence of the gospel. And Dennis, along with a good song, always includes that the necessity of the kingdom is work being done in the here and now. These are good bookends for us. They're good lenses in engaging with scriptural texts and are going to help us today as we look at today's passages. Because both the Old Testament and the New Testament readings can be challenging. Both are connected with yet another biblical theme, which is wanted and needed at times, and is destructive and unwanted at other times. And that is the theme of grievance. Grievance is useful in responding to a wrong or an injustice, in calling out the injustice by name and standing against the injustice, and seeking for a healthy and just and fair resolution. But grievances can also be very destructive, fanning the flames of individual and collective hurts and slights, where an individual or group perceives that they have been put upon and devalued. Rather than addressing or trying to resolve, there's investment in keeping the grievance activated, enlarged, normalized, weaponized, and turned into beliefs and doctrines that have no grounding in reality or in the way of love. At its worst, unchecked grievance creates thoughts and behaviors that allow an individual or collective to believe that they have the right to belittle, ignore, or devalue others in order to preserve their place in the so-called order of things. Nurtured grievance takes on a life of its own, indifferent to the way of love, and not doing the work of the kingdom. So let's start with the Old Testament reading. Our reading today is actually the end of the story where Joseph welcomes and embraces his brothers. But like all stories, there's a beginning and there's a middle. So I'm going to try to do a little Reader's Digest of this. As you recall, Joseph had 11 brothers. He was identified as his father Jacob's favorite, and he appeared to have some heightened gifts. Joseph seemed to have a sense of the fact that he was special, and he told his brothers of a dream he had that all of his older brothers would bow down to him because of the great work that he had done. Needless to say, the brothers did not take well to his favored position with their father, nor to the dreams that he was superior to them. They talked about it with each other over and over. They were aggrieved, and they convinced themselves they had to do something about Joseph. And so they ended up getting rid of him and allowing him to be taken into slavery in Egypt. We don't really know how Joseph initially responded. As a social worker, I imagine he experienced an array of PTSD-type feelings: heartbroken, terrified, furious, scared. He knew his brothers had betrayed him, and I imagine he was likely very aggrieved for at least a period of time. But Joseph went forward and stayed where he was. He had a number of ups and downs serving in Pharaoh's household. And just as an aside, I didn't realize it, Joseph's life takes up a quarter of the book of Genesis. I mean, there are so many things happening. It's worth reading someday if you have some interest in that. But all these happened, years and years passed. And Joseph was eventually recognized as an amazingly skilled administrator. And his work ensured that there was plenty of food for Egypt and others during a great famine. So then we get to the story of today. Enter his brothers. They were sent by their father to Egypt to buy food since there was a famine. And Joseph immediately recognized them, but they didn't recognize Joseph. And Joseph then does sort of a big back and forth with them for a while. He gives them some food, and then he sends them away, and then he sends troops after them saying that he stole it. It's kind of a mess. And during this time, the brothers begin to reflect that maybe they were being punished for their wickedness toward their brother Joseph. Well, finally, we get to the story we heard today, that Joseph, in front of his brothers, tells them he is their brother, and they're rightly terrified. And yet Joseph chooses to show them the way of love. He embraces them, he weeps on their necks, he offers his description of how their evil did not triumph. And it's important to note, he never denies that what they did to him was anything but evil. It was evil and it was wrong. But he uses the lens of love to interpret the larger reality that also occurred. And in that, the power of grievance was broken and the way of love was enacted. Today's gospel is a bit more complicated. Jesus is initially talking with religious leaders and being very Jesus as we know him, teaching that religious practices per se are not the way of love, but word and action that come from the heart reflect the way of love and the work of the kingdom. The religious leaders don't particularly like it. The disciples don't get it. And yet Jesus continues to talk and teach them about this way. And then following this event, at least as it's written, we see Jesus being very un-Jesus-like. Jesus and his disciples are walking away, and a woman begins screaming and yelling and asking for help for her daughter. And of particular note, she asks Jesus for mercy and for a kingdom act of healing for her daughter. Jesus ignores her and doesn't answer. The disciples begin to harangue Jesus and ask him to send her away. She is such an annoyance. They have no interest in her or her request. And Jesus responds, whether to the disciples' request or because the woman won't go away. And he asks, "What is it you want?" And she simply says, "Lord, help me." And Jesus, our Jesus, responds, "It's not fair to take food from whom it belongs and give it to the dogs." Ouch. Double ouch. I'm trying to tone it down here. This is a toughie. At times we know Jesus can really be snarky. But where did this come from? And where did Jesus, the one who declares love is the way and the kingdom is in your midst, imbibe this kind of thinking? I don't know, but I wonder if this is a reflection of the kind of historical collective grievance that can get normalized and then turned into beliefs and doctrines that are passed down from generation to generation without reflection, such that even Jesus was infected for a time. I wonder. Well, what we also know from the text is that the woman was not having any of this. This passage really is one where I wish I could have heard this woman's response. What her tone was like, if it was soft or loud, what her body language was like, how did she say it? Was it sort of that sense of groveling and begging of, "Yes, Lord," yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table? You know, was that how she pled? Or was it more of a sort of a Pharisaical, left-brain Yoda logic intonation? "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Or was it maybe a brassy, loud, kind of a Bette Midler voice saying, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table"? Expletive, expletive, you know, you just, probably not the last, probably not the last. But the fact is, Jesus listened to her, and he heard her, and he recognized her choice to believe in the way of love and the works of the kingdom, and that he was the conduit. And frankly, I think he was instructed. I think he was amazed. I think he was instantly moved, and he didn't stay stuck. He made the immediate choice to change his view and include her as a chosen one, realizing that all are chosen, and her daughter was healed. Jesus had this moment where his gospel of love and the kingdom were expanded from the few to all. Our parish is committed to this direction, to follow the way of love and to do kingdom work in the face of grievance against our society's unwanted others. Every second Saturday, Kieran and Jean and Deirdre and Mary and Jeff and others serve hot meals to our marginalized neighbors at All Saints. That is what the way of love and the kingdom work looks like. Every third Tuesday, several of us make sack dinners and pass out to our houseless neighbors at St. Peter and Paul. And this past Tuesday, it was 102 degrees. Sabina passed out cold wash rags and cut up towels. She went into the parking lot, and if you've ever seen the parking lot at St. Peter and Paul, it's a little rough. Lots of tents, lots of people, lots of action. And Sabina walked around, and when people wanted one with permission, she wrapped it very loosely around their neck, and they were so grateful. This is what the way of love and kingdom work looks like. And in September, we will house Family Promise and serve houseless and undocumented beloved ones with food and shelter. Cass and Katie and Kim and so many others show up. And this is what the way of love and kingdom work looks like. And every Friday at noon, a number of folks ring the bell and say the names and tell the stories of our Black brothers and sisters who have been unjustly killed, to grieve and lament their deaths and stand against the unfounded grievance of white supremacy in its many forms. This is what the way of love and the kingdom work looks like. And this afternoon, representatives from our parish will join with others at our Metro East Convocation meeting, which includes all Episcopal churches on the east side of the river in Portland. They will discuss a proposal for a resolution to repudiate the doctrine of discovery, the 1452 papal bull, which held that all Christian sovereigns and their representative explorers could assert dominion and take title over all non-Christian lands with the full blessing and sanction of the church. The proposed resolution repudiates the doctrine, confesses the sin of ever holding it, and promises to continue to pursue works of reparation. It's pretty late in doing it, but it's happening. And this is what the way of love and kingdom work looks like. There are many more examples I could cite, but I'm not going to do that now. What I want us to do is just keep doing what we are doing and add to it. And let us joyfully continue on this path, walking in the way of love and doing kingdom work. Amen.